Ever feel like you're kind of, fumbling through those awkward social situations, like everyone else got some secret rule book but you?
Totally.
Well, today's deep dive, it's for anyone who's ever felt that way. We're tackling the world of autism and social interaction.
It's fascinating stuff, honestly, and so often misunderstood.
Right. And to help us navigate this, we're diving into this awesome article from Cheap ABA.
They're great, really focused on making this knowledge accessible, which I love.
Absolutely. So the article, it really zeroes in on this idea that, autistic people, they're not trying to be rude, they're just wired differently, especially like when it comes to social interaction.
It's so key to remember that. Even for neurotypical folks, social interaction, it's complex. We mess up those unwritten rules all the time.
Oh, for sure.
Now imagine navigating that with a brain that processes those cues differently.
Okay, yeah, that's a whole other level. Like we're playing the same game, but the rule books are like different editions or something.
Yeah.
And speaking of different rules, the article kept saying social pragmatics. Sounds kind of technical, right? Can you break that down for us?
Sure. It's simpler than it sounds. Think of it like, learning a new language. You learn words, grammar rules.
Yeah.
Those are your social skills.
Okay, I'm with you.
Social pragmatics. That's like understanding the nuances, when to use slang, how to say things so you don't accidentally offend someone.
Ooh, so it's not just what you say, it's how and when.
Exactly. And those unspoken rules, they can be really tricky for someone with autism. It's not about being difficult. It's just processing those social cues differently.
Which leads us to those common misunderstandings the article mentions, right? Like, one that always gets me is the whole eye contact thing. If someone's not making eye contact, I'm like, hello, are you listening?
It can feel kind of dismissive.
Totally natural to think that way. Most neurotypical people, we use eye contact to show we're engaged. But for some on the spectrum, it's overstimulating.
Oh, yeah. It's not ignoring you. It's their brain struggling to filter all that sensory input. Imagine trying to talk while a siren's blaring in your ear. That's kind of what it's like.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. Sensory overload.
Exactly. Then there's interrupting, which often gets taken the wrong way, too.
Right. Seems rude, but
But they might be so excited to share their thoughts, their brain misses those wait-your-turn signals we all rely on. Not malicious, just different processing.
that makes so much sense. It's like endearing almost, Can't contain that enthusiasm. And what about being super direct? Like sometimes even blunt. That's another one where people might take offense.
Oh, absolutely. What might seem insensitive to us, like pointing out flaws, might simply be them being honest. The idea of a white lie, it might not compute,
The gift of honesty, even if it's a bit much sometimes.
Exactly. They're not trying to be hurtful, it's just their way of communicating authentically.
These are those aha moments I love. And it makes you think, even with people who aren't diagnosed, maybe they just communicate differently.
100%.
It might not be about them being difficult. It could be us needing to adjust how we see things, right?
That's where empathy and patience are so, so crucial. Not just with autism, but in all our relationships. When we get that everyone processes things differently, it's huge.
It's like, that saying, be kind, everyone's fighting a hard battle. We don't know what's going on in someone's head, so a little understanding.
Goes such a long way. It's
Wow,
something I think about constantly in my work, actually.
Makes you wonder, how much we misinterpret just because we're not really seeing the whole picture.
Right, we make assumptions, and sometimes those assumptions
They lead us down the wrong path.
Exactly. And it reminds me, the article mentions some tips for effective communication, things we can all do to, make those interactions smoother. Did any of those stand out to you?
Definitely. I mean, patience, huge EE. It sounds so basic, but honestly,
Easier said than done, right?
tell me about it. Just the other day, I totally misjudged this person, thought they were being rude, but it turns out they just process things slower, need a few seconds to respond. Once I realized that. Game changer.
See, patience. It's like magic sometimes.
Yeah,
Opens up understanding.
for real. And speaking of understanding, the article mentioned clear language, being upfront, being mindful of sensory needs, which, after that eye contact talk, makes total sense, and offering support, just letting the person know you're there for them.
All this is so important. And it's key to remember, these are starting points, not a one-size-fits-all thing. Because, like the article said, the autism spectrum is so diverse.
Right. It's not like everyone's having the exact same experience just because.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Two people on the spectrum can be totally different. Different strengths, challenges, ways of seeing the world. So these common misunderstandings, they're great for awareness, but individual understanding, that's always key.
It's like we talked about earlier, different rule books, different ways of navigating the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just as there's no one way to be autistic, there's no single approach to communication that works for everyone.
So true. It's about meeting people where they are, understanding their individual needs and perspectives, not just slapping a label on it and calling it a day. Which actually reminds me, the article touched on something else that I wanted to get your take on: sensory sensitivities.
Oh, absolutely. Sensory sensitivities are a huge part of the artistic experience, and they can really impact social interactions in a big way.
Right. We talked about eye contact being overwhelming for some, but I imagine that's just the tip of the iceberg.
It really is. For some people on the spectrum, everyday sensory experiences like bright lights, loud noises, certain textures, or even strong smells can be incredibly distracting or even painful. Imagine trying to have a conversation while a fire alarm is going off in your head. It's hard to focus on anything else.
Wow, that's a powerful image. It makes sense why someone might seem withdrawn or overwhelmed in certain environments.
Exactly. And it highlights why those tips for effective communication we were discussing are so important. Creating a sensory-friendly environment can make a world of difference.
So true. And speaking of those tips, I wanted to circle back to that because I feel like there's so much to unpack there. Like, we talked about patience, but what about using clear language? What did that actually look like in practice?
That's such a good question. It's about avoiding idioms, sarcasm, or figures of speech that might be easily misunderstood. Think direct, literal communication. Instead of saying, "Can you give me a hand with this?"
Hmm.
You might say, "I need help carrying this box." It's about making your meaning crystal clear.
So it's about removing the guesswork, making sure everyone's on the same page, which makes total sense. But I can see how it might take some getting used to for those of us who are used to more nuanced communication styles.
Absolutely. It's a different way of thinking, for sure. And it requires us to be more mindful of our own communication habits, to really tune in to how our words might be landing.
That's a great point. And it's not just about what we say, but how we say it, right? Like the article mentioned being mindful of tone of voice and body language.
Absolutely. Nonverbal communication can be just as important as verbal communication, especially for people who process information differently. A calm, steady tone of voice and relaxed body language can go a long way in creating a sense of safety and ease.
It's like we're creating a safe space for communication, one where everyone feels heard and understood.
Exactly. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Building bridges of understanding, one interaction at a time.
It really is. And you know what's funny? When you really think about it, a lot of these communication tips, they're not just for like autism, they're just good communication in general.
100%. Being mindful, patient, clear when we talk to each other, those are good no matter what.
Exactly. It's not about like changing who we are. It's more like adding tools to our communication toolbox,
Yeah.
right?
I like that. Different approaches for different situations. And being open to learning from the people around us. Everyone's got something to teach us about connecting.
That is so true. It's like we're all students in the school of communication, always learning.
I love that. And it makes me think, understanding autism, it's not just memorizing facts. It's about seeing the world in a new way, one that values all kinds of differences, not just the ones we're used to.
So well said. You know, it makes me think about something you said earlier about society valuing being direct, being authentic more. Like, what if we all loosened up on those unspoken rules a bit? Would that make the world more welcoming, not just for autism, but for everyone who feels a little different?
That is such a great question. It's hard to know for sure, but I do think that embracing all the different ways people communicate, the different ways we are, that's got to lead to more understanding, more empathy.
It's like that saying, right? If we were all the same, life would be boring. It's the differences that make things interesting, that make us human.
Perfectly said.
Yeah.
And when we approach those differences with curiosity, with openness, not fear or judgment, that's where real connection begins.
Couldn't agree more. Well, on that note of connection and embracing all the beautiful ways people experience the world, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
It's been amazing exploring all this with you.
Likewise. And a huge thank you to everyone listening for joining us on this journey of understanding. Remember, every interaction, it's a chance to connect, to learn, to grow. Until next time, keep those minds open, keep asking those questions, and keep embracing the beautiful diversity of the human experience.